Kantar, and hearing from what Mr. Karganovic had to say about the International Criminal Court for Yugoslavia, for former Yugoslavia, is it possible for the same mistakes that happened during the ICTY to be repeated for the Special Tribunal for Lebanon?
We cannot compare the two tribunals. For sure, if we set aside all the political issues related to the NATO's willing to establish such a tribunal, it is based at least on some definitions that it is part of the international law, especially when we are speaking about the aggression, war crimes, crimes against humanity. This is something that happened
totally
in
different
Yugoslavia.
from the
Here
case
we
of
are
Lebanon.
speaking on it's really a very, very special tribunal that happened in Lebanon. That does not mean in any way that we are trying to lower anything related to the price that Lebanon paid and to the victims and to their families. We are totally in support for those people that they lost their beloved ones. But at least it is something that now it has been studied also in the universities.
Not only that, there's
it is a big precedent.
It's a big question about Lebanon being through more than a 15+ civil war and having thousands and thousands of casualties, and warlords and criminals who are still living up to date are not being faced or criminalized or even brought to court
and it's
by
not
the Lebanese
first political assassination.
Exactly. Then why was
example,
the STL made only for
the
this assassination and not for other war crimes?
For Benazir Bhutto, for example, in Pakistan, it was a big crime there that happened. Nothing that was under pressure to do this. It was, I think, that the way that also they ratified the court itself and the articles that were very well written in a way that will lead for Lebanon to fund this court. We have paid until now, I think, more than $500 million for this court. We are paying every year, I think, around $60 million from our budget, from our taxes, from our citizens. And believe me, in their bureaucratic way of dealing with the issues, the whole situation that it is related to the high salaries and to the procedures, that it is part of a bureaucratic system.
Shouldn't take that much
they
time.
will review and review and review, and it will take a lot of time.
Well, before we take our second break for tonight, let me ask you, Mr. Ochsenreiter, this question. So, some pro-Western analysts believe that since the establishment of the Special Tribunal for Yugoslavia in '93, way before the trial even started, the International Criminal Tribunal for Yugoslavia, it has irreversibly changed the landscape of international humanitarian law and provided victims an opportunity to voice the horrors that they witnessed and they experienced. Now, could there be some hope of such courts for the oppressed people in maybe, let's say, Palestine or Bahrain or Burma?
No, not at all, because, and you said a very important thing in your question, pro-Western analysts. So the point is, in the view, in the eyes of those international tribunals, wherever you find them, really wherever you find them, there are existing two types of victims. You have victims first class and you have victims second class. Unfortunately, the group of victims you were mentioning in your questions are victims second class. Why are they victims second class? Because they don't serve the geopolitical Western interest to negotiate, to talk about, or to do a trial about this. And this was quite from the beginning. Let me just note something. When the Nuremberg trial, which was the so-called, which is until today the so-called role model for those international courts, they were just negotiating, just talking about the German war crimes. While the tribunal was talking in Nuremberg, German prisoners of war starved in American prisoner camps, for example, on German soil. Nobody was negotiating about the Anglo-American air attacks against German civilians. The city of Dresden was pulverized in a time, some weeks, months before the war ended, so there was no military necessity. So it was already, the nucleus of international tribunals was already very much one-sided, and this is the role model until today. We have the same with Yugoslavia, where the Serbs are obviously the victims second class, and the Bosnians, for example, are the victims first class, and we will witness the same thing now also in Lebanon. You were asking the right question: why was nothing negotiated about the Lebanese civil war or about other assassinations before? Because these victims were not able to be instrumentalized for Western interests. This is the very, very easy and also cynical answer on that question.
Well, we will continue talking about this issue and about the issue of actually starting even new courts for the region, for Syria, for example. But after the break, we have to take our second break for tonight. Please stay tuned.
Time. Variable. Event. The only constant variable in life is change. Broader perspective. Arguments and counter-arguments on our platform.
Global Insights. The globe on our platform.
Pollution and climate change. Medicine manipulation. Genetically modified food. The destruction of wildlife and corporate exploitation. These are all part of a new terrorism threatening our future.
Eco-terrorism. Global awakening to a world under threat.
We are back with the Middle East Stream with Mr. Bassam Kantar and Mr. Manuel Ochsenreiter. Mr. Kantar, today there are several calls for the UN Security Council to move immediately to establish a Syrian war crimes tribunal, initiating investigations and prosecutions as soon as possible to send a clear message to those who allegedly committed genocide, namely they are the Syrian government, and to those just following orders. This is how they are putting it. But in reality, all they want is to see President Bashar Assad being tried and prosecuted just like President Milosevic. What are the odds there?
If we go back to the first step on the whole process related to the Syrian crisis, I think in 2012 the Human Rights Council based in Geneva ratified a decision for an investigative committee to investigate the whole issues related to Syria. This committee is headed by a Brazilian judge, and it had been announcing what they have did for more than 7 or 8 times. In every report, if you go in details, you can find that until at least the last 2 reports, they were too much documenting all what's happening in related to the government and the military actions on ground. Later on, they were more and more documenting and describing the crimes that it's committed also by terrorist groups and armed groups. Until now, the end result of such a reports is like asking for the International Criminal Court to investigate. But this is something related to the Security Council. If the states accepted the Roma Convention to be part of the international law under the secure veto of the Security Council, they have to pay the price, and the Russian veto is there waiting for them.
That is actually my question for Mr. Manuel. Mr. Ochsenreiter, the same voices that they are calling for this tribunal are calling for what they are referred to as the Herculean diplomatic push by the United States and other interested nations not to withstand Russia's solidarity with the Syrian government and to submit a Security Council resolution establishing a Syrian tribunal. Now, in the midst of the turmoil in the region, do you think that such calls can actually prevail without the approval of Russia?
Of course, the West, they can establish such a court wherever, and it will call itself the court for war crimes on Syria or whatever. They will accuse a lot of people. They will accuse people like President Bashar al-Assad, who will be, of course, not present in the courtroom, and they will judge him. And that, of course, they can do this. But this exposes the purpose of such trials. And something else, when I have been now several times to Syria during the war and reporting from there, Syria is a functioning state. Syria is not a territory of barbarians. The Syrian state and the Syrian society is very much able to do trials in their national courts about the war crimes which happened. They are really able to do that. So pushing for an international court on Syria means at the same time to say these people are not able to find justice. And this is a very dominating, maybe somehow a neo-colonial view on that country. So, but of course they will do this. There will be somewhen a sort of international court, and this court will accuse especially the people of the Syrian government, and they will try to expose then those people as war criminals, and it will push sanctions on Syria and so on. We saw the same thing with Serbia in the past, and I think this will be the development.
Well, Mr. Kantar, the ICC's political ties have become a prominent subject of scrutiny at a regional and international level, especially after what we saw of summons of certain Lebanese press outlets or media outlets. The court is now believed to be using more to be used as a more political tool than it is actually a legal institution. What do you think the stance of the Lebanese authorities should be now that the politics is prevailing over justice in the courtrooms of the ICC?
Well, I think that we've paid a big price because we were not part of Roma Convention. Lebanon signed the convention in 1997, but later, in 1999, but later on, after 5 years of the signature, a lot of governments ratified the convention, and it was like actually active and implemented since 2004. But Lebanon was always outside the Roma Convention. Later on, when the big crime happened and the late Prime Minister of Al-Akhbar were killed, there was the announcements that we need a special tribunal. And until now, no one answered the big question. Why, since the early moments of this crime, if really there was a decision, a governmental decision for an international for dealing with this crime on an international level, why we passed all this process of establishing a special court, why we didn't sign the Roma Convention and ask the ICC to deal with the crime. And this is something that until now is not answered from all political groups, that they are opposing the court or they are with the court. For sure, the bloc that was opposing the court, and until now they are opposing the tribunal, they were considering that the ICC would lead for the same results. But forgive me to say, like, I don't think that ICC standards is now that much low with the standards of the STL and the way that they are dealing with the press. We didn't witness until now ICC criticizing and criminalizing the acts of publishing leaked documents the same way that the STL have did to the Lebanese press. So,
well, they tried doing so with the French journalists, but France was very firm on its stance toward the issue and toward protecting its journalists.
Well, don't compare Lebanon to France. For example, there is a Lebanese prisoner in France since 30 years, and Lebanon is not even announcing, or there is no Lebanese leader brave enough to ask them to implement their decisions and to release them. In comparison, there was a French citizen imprisoned in Mexico, and later on the French government announced that they gonna ban any relation with Mexico until they will release the citizen, and they released him. So you cannot compare in any way the way that the governments protect their sovereignty, their dignity, with a country like Lebanon, where you have political leaders that they are not in any way defending our sovereignty, defending our dignity. This is something that really this is the big injury that happened to us since the early moment.
Who was captured in France, he deserves us to be talking about him, which is Mr. George Abdallah, who was imprisoned for more than 20 years now.
For 30 years,
30 years exactly, in the French prisons. And there was a point last year when he was about to be released, but certain political agendas also were played in that matter. Now, Mr. Ochsenreiter, before we finish our show for tonight, let me ask you about the ICC's prosecutorial strategies. They are now under the microscope not from the international community, but from the, let's say, from the press or from the concerned people who have actually ICCs or special tribunals there, since it has become obvious that they target only one side of a conflict over another, and now which this enables punishment gaps at the international and the domestic level. Now, is the political balance officially dead in the courtrooms of the ICC, or is there still some certain justice, hope for a justice in there?
I think the political balance in the courtroom cannot be dead because it was never born. It was from the beginning a very one-sided thing. It was from the beginning a thing of a strong part against the weak part, to dominate the weak part. And the problematic point is that the political nature of those tribunals, is in the meanwhile acknowledged by the Western leaders. I think not just one single Western leader in the European Union, as well as, of course, in the US, would say that these trials are today neutral, non-political things. They say, yes, of course, it has to be political. I think this is a trend, a political fashion we can see in the meanwhile. So it will be, of course, not like this. And I think it's very hard to bring political balance in it when the purpose from the beginning is not to have such a balance. And again, these are political trials. The prisoners who are going to prison because they got a lawsuit, they are political prisoners. When they are facing a trial in their country by an acknowledged sovereign trial, it is something else. But those trials, and we were talking about the Lebanese trial, are very obviously political institution to impose in that case a Western political domination on the certain country.
Well, not only that, Mr. Kantar, taking from what Mr. Ochsenreiter just said, which is very important, to highlight the collective responsibility that is being put on certain chunks of community in the Lebanese Republic. There's the target of the ICC that has always been firm with calling account the suspected for bearing the greatest responsibility for such atrocities committed. But in the case of Lebanon, where the assassination of Prime Minister Rafiq Hariri took place, I mean, where does that place labeling such collective responsibility on a community that supports Hezbollah, supports the Islamic resistance, and they are being accused of being behind the alleged assassination, and therefore inciting even deeper divisions within the community between, namely, Shia and Sunni blocks or communities? How can that be solved?
Unfortunately, I don't have an answer for such a big question. The division between the Islamic sects, especially between the Sunni and the Shia, is part of a big plan for the whole region. It's part of the big plan to divide the countries. And for sure, such a very, very unacceptable crime, when used in one way or another to divide more and more the communities, I think that the circumstances of the crime that we are still until now living at is, and allow me to say, is bigger than the crime itself.
And based on very controversial evidence.
Sure. Sure, it is now after, and I was speaking at the beginning of the interview about Edward Snowden and how he proved for us the way that the governments can control the database, can control the SIM cards, can control the way to prove that the IMEI of a certain phone can be transferred from one way from one place to another, just to prove and to fabricate a whole scene
this
of
person
crime.
was actually in this place when he wasn't. Well, I want to thank you very much, Mr. Bassam Kantar, journalist at Al-Akhbar Lebanese Daily, for being with us tonight and explaining to us what the STL for Lebanon is all about. And Mr. Manuel Ochsenreiter, editor-in-chief for the Zuerst magazine, thank you very much for being with us from Berlin. Your information is very powerful, as always. That was our show for tonight. Thank you for watching, and tune in next week for more from the Middle East stream.